to Daniel Cormier, who said all week long, Kenny, that not only was Volkan Oezdemir not on his level, but he just said, dude, I'm going to smash this guy. Like, you don't understand, right? I am just going to dispose of Volkan Oezdemir properly, and it's probably not going to take me very long. I thought DC fought a near-perfect fight here, Kenny, and deserved the bonus. Just a dominant effort from the soon-to-be 39-year-old UFC light heavyweight champ.
Yeah, I thought Daniel really in mixing it up with his wrestling, his striking on the inside. I thought he hurt Volkan a few times on the feet there. But DC had me scared a little bit in the beginning of the first round, just trading. It's exciting to watch, but when you're watching your buddy in there trading with a heavy-handed fighter like a Volkan Oezdemir, I was very nervous for him. Once he settled into his feet, once he settled into his rhythm, it was all Daniel Cormier. Volkan just did not have an answer for anything that DC wanted to do in there. Heading into the second round, it seemed like just everyone knew Daniel was going to go out there and get the finish. It was an excellent performance from him. The pressure, the pacing, DC was ready, and he fought like he had a chip on his shoulder, as we knew. He was out there to establish himself as the champion. I think that there was a part of DC where he felt like, you know what, I have the belt, but I don't feel like I'm the champ here. I lost my last one. I need to go out there and prove to everybody who Daniel Cormier is, and I think he did a great job of doing that.
And he did what he was supposed to do as a minus 350 betting favorite. But you're right, Kenny, standing there and trading with someone in Volkan Oezdemir who had dusted two guys in 70 seconds combined coming in is a scary proposition, especially given all that's at stake with DC, right? And we're going to soon start talking about a potential super fight between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. I mean, there was so much to lose here for DC, right? He had his kids in the building watching live for the first time, and I guess he just knew what was going to happen and knew that Volkan Oezdemir was not yet ready nor on his level. And for Henry Hooft, I think this one, Kenny, has to sting, right? 0 for 3 now, at least, in trying to prep guys to beat Daniel Cormier. I also feel like for Daniel, he learned a lot with the second Rumble Johnson training camp. You know, he said before the rematch with John Jones that his training for that Rumble rematch wasn't where it should have been. Because he felt like there was a clear path to victory. So you maybe wondered coming into this fight where there was an even clearer path to victory than against Rumble, against a guy in Volkan Oezdemir who just was not on the level, as we saw this weekend. But Daniel had a great training camp and put himself in position to put forth this type of performance to his right-hand man, Bob Cook, and Rose Sanchez and Javier Mendez. You know, they really got one of the greatest of all time here. And Kenny, we talked a little bit on the broadcast, Fight Pass and other places about everything that is this guy, Daniel Cormier, one of our dear friends, and what he brings to the table as not just a fighter, but as a color commentator and as a promoter and as a father and as a guy who pays registration fees for wrestling for kids that aren't his, and a guy who buys $5,000 worth of toys and puts them in a truck because a toy drive hasn't worked out the way it should. And he doesn't want that shit publicized. You know, this is a special, special human being, future UFC Hall of Famer. And it was nice for me to see our home city, Kenny, embrace him to this extent. Because I know Cormier at times has liked to be the heel a little bit because there's a big WWE fan in him, and heels move the needle and people buy pay-per-views when heels are on them. It was nice to see Cormier be the good guy here in a big sports city and produce the way he did this weekend.
Without a doubt. You know, Daniel Cormier is the guy that, you know, every fan should be looking up to, every fighter should be looking up to. This is a guy who does it all and does it all very, very well. His responsibilities as a father, this guy's going to every single football game, every single wrestling practice, you know, ballet for his daughter. I mean, he's such an active dad. And then you're like, oh, well, this guy's got to train 3 times a day for a championship fight. He's the champion of the world in light heavyweight weight class. He's traveling all over the place. He's doing commentary duties. He's doing UFC Tonight with me. He has so many balls up in the air. It's ridiculous. So for Daniel Cormier to succeed at this level in a variety of things, it is so impressive. And then when you know the guy on a personal level and how genuine he is, Daniel's one of the greats, period. Then let's talk about all the adversity that he's dealt with in his life and how he's turned that into a positive and how he's become such a good human being, how he's a 2-time Olympian. He's one of those special, rare individuals.
People forget that this is a man who lost a child, an infant, at one point in time. You know, So I texted him. I was like, I don't know if at this point, like, I get the DC logo tattooed on my body. Like, I don't even know how to pay the proper respect at this point in time. And some listeners might be thinking, man, this is like a UFC play-by-play commentator. What, I would have sat here and celebrated Volkan Özdemir's win in a similar way, even if I don't have the personal relationship, right? But it's just incredible to see DC accomplish everything that he has, Kenny. And since you guys started working together on UFC Tonight, right, to see everything that his professional life has entailed, I mean, you've had a firsthand look at it. So as far as Daniel Cormier now moving forward, 3 toughest fights in his career, right? Heavyweight Grand Prix, 25-minute war with Josh Barnett, 25-minute loss to John Jones in the first meeting. But the fight that everybody talks about historically for DC, October 3rd, 2015, UFC 192 against Alexander Gustafsson. Toughest fight of DC's career. And that is the obvious fight on paper that would be next for Daniel Cormier. But lurking, and I brought it up on pay-per-view, is this super fight against the heavyweight champion, Stipe Miocic. Now, I spoke with DC this morning. And anyone who knows him doesn't have to talk to him to know that he doesn't want to step on Cain Velasquez's dick to get into this fight with Stipe. But this is a big fight. This is a fight that is winnable for Daniel Cormier, in my opinion. This is a fight that is appetizing to Cormier if the money is right. And I'm not sure, Kenny, that this is a fight that is any less dangerous or easier than a rematch with Gus.
That's an interesting point. Listen, I think Alexander Gustafsson, as you said, is the toughest fight in the division for Daniel Cormier right now. I think that's more likely. For me, I would not like to see that fight against Stipe Miocic. I don't know at this point, with Daniel creeping on 30, being at 39 years old, to fight at heavyweight against someone like a Stipe Miocic. I don't know, man. I mean, this is a heavyweight striker, a guy who can do a lot of things. And, can Daniel strike with Stipe? I think, there's aspects of his game where maybe he might have a speed advantage to a certain extent. Is he going to hit as hard as Stipe? Is he going to be able to knock out someone like Stipe?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, if Francis couldn't do it, I don't know. I don't think so. And I think to eat heavyweight shots from someone like Stipe Miocic, and if Daniel's going to switch things up and go to the wrestling, well, Stipe can wrestle as well. Is Daniel a better wrestler technically? Yes. Does he have better entries? I don't know. So it just concerns me when I see Daniel plant his feet and do this and just kind of try to lean back to avoid shots. You can't do that against someone like Stipe. He can get away with that against maybe Volkan, but I would not want to see him at this point in his career. If you're talking about Daniel Cormier at 34, 35, absolutely. Let's see it. At this point, I don't think Daniel needs to do that.
I like that you're keeping it real. It sounds to me like you feel like the Gustafsson fight is an easier proposition.
Yes.
For
easy,
Daniel.
but easier. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the betting lines would reflect that, Kenny. I guess I just see everything that this weight cut entails, right? For him to have to make 205 pounds again at 39 years old is no picnic at all. I see the fact that Stipe weighs in at about 246 pounds, and I think DC would probably be in that range as well. I don't know. I just feel like certainly from a financial standpoint, DC
it's a huge fight.
would want that. And I think to stamp his legacy with a chance to become a 2-division champion. But he was a little bit vague with me as to which fight was more difficult, and I just think it's interesting. I do think that Dana White is interested, and I do think that Dana is going to move to make that fight potentially.
Wow.
What's a bigger pay-per-view fight for us, Kenny? Is it Stipe Cain Velasquez or Stipe Daniel Cormier? I don't know the answer. I don't know what the internal metrics would say about a returning Cain Velasquez against Daniel Cormier, who has been the far more active party and a guy who's been all over TV for the last 5 years.
Yeah, and listen, as much as Cain Velasquez deserves that shot, I'm a huge Cain Velasquez fan, have been for a very long time. I think that I don't know if the promotion can rely on Cain to show up on Fight Night at this point, just based on everything he's been dealing with. I hope that is not the case, but it becomes very difficult for a business to say, oh, here's a guy who's been injured for all these years. Let's book a date with him. It really is a tough thing. And Daniel Cormier has been one of those guys, even with his injuries, that for the most part, he's going to show up on fight night. He's a guy you can rely on.
Right.
So tough decision there for both Daniel and the UFC.
And then just sort of putting a bow on the two title fights, big picture, you saw two contenders, challengers that, at least in my opinion, just appeared not to be ready for prime time. We talked about Francis Ngannou and where he may go from here. Still going to be a big fight next. Still going to be a top 6 guy for Francis, and that's very exciting. But for Volkan Oezdemir, right, the blueprint, I think, is there right now. This is a young fighter, at least in terms of his MMA miles, but a lot of work to do for Volkan, I would think, as he tries to get himself back to where he got here very quickly in the UFC.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are kind of the fights that, when you face that high-level opponent, when you face the champion, you go back and go, okay, wow, I got a lot of work to do. I got to get my wrestling in order. I got to get my jiu-jitsu better. I got to get my get-ups much sharper. I got to be smarter when I'm on my feet. I got to move more. So they're going to look back at that tape, and both Francis and Volkan will improve from this fight. I think there's nothing